sushi, of course, makes complete sense in a competitive environment. Why food wouldn't be just flying in front of the camera?
Oh, yeah, of course.
So how do we feel about this match? I feel like I've been asking this question to everybody that I've had a chance to have in the chair here, but this is going to be it. This is for all the marbles, Gameking versus Metranos. That's what we're playing for, right? Marbles, crown points. That's what I meant to say.
That's a great analogy.
Crown points, of course. But this is pretty good. I think Metranos brought some really interesting decks, and of course Gameking has his own flavor, and he's obviously proved that he's a fantastic player on top of this as well. Metranos has a ton of experience. That Crocsman deck has been doing some pretty good work, actually. I mean, I think it's anyone's game.
I really think it is, yeah. I think like if you look at pure lineups, I'd say like maybe Metranos is favored, just because like obviously the gold weather's very hard to deal with. Gameking does have some weather clears. But the sheer volume of like cold weather and attrition damage that Metranos is playing should make it very, very challenging for him to overcome that. However, like Gameking is such a fantastic player with a very strong lineup of decks himself, and yeah, you know, I'm going to say it's favored, but I'm going to go like it's like 60% Metranos.
And we were talking about this earlier, where it's you know, Gameking has the knowledge of the decks, and with that knowledge, a great player can do really, really good things because you can just know exactly what you're playing around, you know exactly what can beat you, and you know exactly what you need to answer. So Gameking, with that, armed with that knowledge, we have seen he has been devastating. So it's going to be, I really do think that it can go either way, but you make a good point. The gold weathers that Metranos has favored, 3 of his decks do run double gold weathers, and I do have...
The other one has a singular, I think it's three twos and a 1.
3-2, yeah, right. The Henselt had the 1, and of course there was the doubles. And I'm going to just grab.
We're looking for the deck lists at the moment, by the way. We're not just like
randomly.
Around, so.
I did have them right next to me, so I do need to.
Have they like fallen down here?
No, I think they maybe were taken away. But if anyone's listening, maybe we can get those back, as we can just maybe review some of the decks. But we do hear the game's getting started up very soon, as these players have had time to meditate, rest, relax, and focus.
Yeah, Metranos, a keen meditator, apparently. He said that he meditates up to 50 minutes a day before starting his ladder session, and then plays for 10 to 12 hours, which sees him have the most games on the pro ladder by far, which is awesome. But yeah, Metranos is he was a player that I wasn't like as familiar with. I knew his Skellige decks. I knew his work playing Skellige very closely because like I net deck him all the time before this event. But after getting to meet him and like talking to him and seeing his attitude about competing and stuff, he is such a formidable player. He's fantastic.
He's great. He's a really positive person. He does meditate every day, which is really good. It really definitely, you know, sometimes you can get on that pro ladder and you can get a little tilted, maybe a little salty. Maybe you're running into some bad matchups. Maybe, you know, you run into somebody who's just running something really weird and it's like, why is this person against me? How is this fair? It seems like he gets to keep a cool head and definitely has no problem playing tons of games, over 2,600 games in Metranos's on Metranos's resume, and still climbing.
Yeah, absolutely unbelievable dedication. And Gameking is somebody who knows a lot about dedication too. Already almost like a Gwent tournament regular, having played here previously. Like, this guy is, he's just an amazing player. Like, I'm a big fan of Gameking as a player, and he was my pick pre-tournament to win it, so I've got to back my boy and say that he's going to win it. But I just think this guy's brilliant. I've never met anybody who can talk for as long or as in-depth about Gwent. It's formidable. Like, he was talking about the efficiency of running Iris in monsters. And like I came back like 3 hours later and he was still talking about it. It was amazing.
Because there are some really great debates about the about how, you know, how often I talked to Gameking. Of course, we saw the interview before the matchup with Freddie Babes. He believes that it's a high risk, it's a risk reward, but usually you're going to get that value from Iris, and it's often enough that he believes in that card. Maybe some other players think that there's some better silver options, but Gameking has shown that, you know, his lists have been performing very well, and we are here in the finals with him. And we're going to be getting into those games in just a moment. But I mean, other than that, I mean, what are the other big things? The bands still haven't been decided yet. But we're going to get to see the lineup. So once again, we were talking about Metranos' choice to actually bring Croc on Crate Axeman, which is very not quite as popular as Bran, which Gameking of course brought. Gameking bringing Aridin, and although Metranos has a very strong anti-monster lineup, probably more suited to taking out Dagon than Aridin. I don't know if you would agree with that statement.
No, I'd agree with that for sure. I think it's definitely more suited to taking out Dagon, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it's going to be very efficient against Aridin, right?
Yeah.
So, unlike yesterday, I don't expect to see Metranos accidentally ban Aridin. I think that he's probably looking to ban something that has a better chance of dealing with the weather, or just like the sort of the vanilla ban of just banning the highly efficient Nilfgaard spies. So I'd expect to see like either Emir or a Bruverhoog ban come out of Metranos. Personally, I think Gameking's probably looking to take out Metranos's. Honestly, at this point, with how he's done in the tournament so far, I think Crack would almost be a justified bet. ban.
That would be very, very interesting if Gameking opted to ban the deck that maybe has like the highest variance of being, because there's in long rounds, you get a lot of value out of Axeman, and of course, Gameking does play a lot of pro ladder and does play a lot of scrims and probably practices against the very, very best decks. We saw how he absolutely dismantled Mill in Gwentslam #1 without actually truly teching against it, was just able to play it because he played that Mill matchup over and over and over again. So I believe that he put a lot of time into perfecting the matchup against Nilfgaard and probably Bran, which Metranos did not bring. So that maybe could be just a wrench in the plans of Gameking's strategy. So we're going to have a chance to see what those bans are in just a moment. We're just going to make sure we get all that information correctly. And of course, these players are still getting ready.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is like such a fantastic time to talk about like some of the, you're talking about like how he dismantled Mill, Gameking. One of the great things here is that players all have very unique opinions about the game. It's not as straightforward as you'd imagine. It's not like everybody's sitting around going, yeah, Restore's good, isn't it? It's like there's been so many debates and so many discussions about individual cards, like I mentioned with Iris and stuff. So it's so interesting to see so many diverse opinions and approaches towards even like balancing and stuff, competing at the top level. It's really fascinating to me. And Gameking is definitely one of those who has very, like, I would say, like, unique opinions about the game. Like, some of the things that he deems viable or unviable are things that, like, most people would kind of, like, scoff at the suggestion, but he's, like, his unique opinions have carried him all the way to the final.
Yeah,
so
like,
it's absolutely amazing.
Running, like, uncommon picks like Guardian. Like, he believes the Guardian is a very, very strong card, as it does really clog up and make cards. You know, we've seen decks that already struggle with Mulligans a lot in Dagon and you know, some of the Northern Realms list. We saw Freddy struggle with some Mulligans, but making it even worse with the Guardian is legitimate, I think. And plus, it is an 11-point card on top of that, so you do get a lot of value when you play it. It's a pretty good way to lead off a round, and it is one of Gameking's favorite cards. So hopefully, I'm sure he's hoping that Nilfgaard doesn't get banned on his side because it is one of his favorite decks, although he kind of called that out. So we signaled the flare for Metranos to maybe be like, I think that he's probably really, really good with this deck, as we have seen already that he is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't quite have the deck list yet, so I'm not sure. Is there a Vanamar in Gameking's Nilfgaard? I believe there is.
Yeah, the deck list, I did put them down. We did see so many Nilfgaard lists, so I'm trying to search my memory, and I'm not sure. I know there was Vanamar in a Nilfgaard
I believe
list.
Gameking's Nilfgaard is the one that has Vanamar. This is when there's like thousands of people in chat going, idiot, no it doesn't. But I can't see the deck list right now. But
it is
I'm pretty sure it does, and if it does, that's a huge influence on that matchup, right?
Well, because we saw how Tailbot was probably wishing that he had Vanamar in his list, as he had 0 weather clears at all, and Metranos just was able to just plow him with weather for any round, for any long round that he wanted to. So it is possible. I mean, we'll eventually see it in hand if there is an issue with the list for whatever reason. It's possible that they needed to maybe I see. We're going to get them right here. They are on their way.
They're inbound right now.
Inbound. I think that they just needed to review everything for the client. We want to make sure that everything is absolutely above board, and we're going to get them in our hands in just a moment. And we can answer that question about Vanamar.
Does he have
presently?
Vanamar?
He does indeed have Vanamar.
No, this is Metranos.
That's Metranos.
That's Metranos.
Live. He does.
He does have Vanamar. So he does have the weather clear.
That's good. That's very, very important. But also, on top of the debates that we've had about what cards are really viable and what decks, what are the best cards for each slot, we've also had some new cards come out, and there's been a lot of discussion about that. We saw a really cool card released today. Well, we'll talk about that in a bit. Now that we finally have the bans here, I think that's probably a little bit more pressing. We're talking about this. So, Brewer Hoog being banned, Metranos will not be able to play his Brewer deck, and Gameking, unfortunately for him, will not be able to rock Nilfgaard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is Metranos just acknowledging like the super efficiency of that. He knows Gameking's got Vanamar, and without that weather dealing the attrition damage in a matchup against Nilfgaard, almost all of his decks are going to suffer. Like it would go down to the Spy's Mirror essentially, and then that's going to be really rough. I mean, Machine Hensel we've seen that deck perform wonderfully, but it's not so much for that matchup. So that's a really smart ban coming out from Metranos, I think. And I think Gameking banning Brewer is actually an excellent choice as well. That Brewer Hoog deck with the double gold weathers has just been dominating. The Marksman into Zoltan Chivet combo is very satisfying, but also probably very frustrating if you're playing against it.
Yeah, you can't count Scoia'tael out in this new Brewer list that is, wasn't present at all in Gwentslam 1, has been very, very prevalent in Metranos with that double gold weather flavor in it has been, it's done a lot of work for him as well. I'm really excited to see how the Axeman does perform and what that matchup is going to look like. I am also excited to see if Gameking, when Gameking opts to go in with Aridin, as he may feel like that is probably his weakest deck in this lineup against Metranos. But each of these players, there is cash on the line for each win, so you probably want to lead off with your strongest first.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting attitude. I think that is what we see. I mean, it sounds like we're going to be getting Henselt. So that's going to be Metranos on Henselt versus Bruverhoog, Gameking.
All right.
There you go, identifying just by the voice lines.
This is the finals. You have waited long enough, my friends. We are going to go into the finals here for Gwentslam number 2. Crown a champion between Metranos or Gameking. Gameking looking for his first place victory, although he has been in the finals 3 times here in Vienna. And let's get this underway. Henselt taking on Bruverhoog. How do we feel about this matchup as we watch the Mulligans?
I think this is a really interesting matchup. I think it's actually Henselt's fine in this. The machines are pretty good. Scoia'tael has a lot of mid-range units already looking in Gameking's hand. You see a lot of 7s and 8s, and even though there's some 2s, they're also 7s because they're going to be spawning out Dwarven Mercenaries. So there's a lot of similarly strength units, which makes the ballistas especially extremely efficient. And actually, Metranos has a pretty decent opening hand. He's got those siege supports available to, really up his tempo early on in the round. And then Gameking he's gonna struggle to outmove a ballista bolt, essentially.
It's true. I mean, it's the ballistas we've seen the amount of value. Like, it looks like a lot of times in the Henselt matchup, being able to Henselt out the Kidweni siege support can offer you a lot of value and make it really hard to win a round. But with the Henselt that we have seen a couple of times already, getting the ballistas out, especially if there's any Kidweni siege supports already on the board, it just seems to be like a devastating amount of tempo as Gameking decides what his first move is going to be, and it's going to be the open pass against Henselt.
Yeah, just choosing not to engage with the loss of the coin flip there. Go for the open pass.
Sorry, Metranos doing the open pass. Gameking taking it with the Blue Mountain Commandos here.
Taking it with the BM.
No, the BMCs is what I was going to say. I was going to get a little bit too casual here, as we should be taking this a little bit more seriously and not doing any acronyms here, as this is the finals of Gwentslam number 2.
GS2, you mean? But
yeah.
It's so this is like. So what do you think of this open pass? I mean, Metranos is perfectly comfortable doing this, right? He likes 2 fairly long rounds. He likes to get his sort of ballista tempo going, like with those siege supports, and then he's got enough power to be able to burst 2 rounds down. So what do you think that Gameking's thinking now that he hasn't got his BMCs available? Sorry, Blue Mountain Commandos available. And what are you thinking? Like, that's a fairly solid loss of tempo. I mean, when you're agitating out those Dwarven Mercenaries, you've lost a real target for that, right?
Agitating out, I like that. I like that.
Well, he's an agitator. He agitates.
He agitates them. It's like, get out there, come on. I'm sorry, am I bothering you? Gameking's going to lead off with the Roach Ragnarok, which is going to make this a little bit harder for Metranos to be able to really get. It doesn't seem to be like a real good answer. The best answer is probably to apply the Gold Weather on his side because he does have White Frost as well. Committing the Drought is probably the choice between do you want to commit White Frost or Drought in this situation. I think that because there are ranged and siege lock units in Scoia'tael's situation, White Frost could be okay. And then of course, I don't know. There's not a lot of punishment that Metranos can offer if things get stacked on the melee row. But Geralt Ard can definitely adjust those units into the row. It's going to be Drought though, so it's going to be basically a kind of a. It's going to be a wash a little bit. It's going to be more about positioning at this point and actually manipulation, where Scoia'tael is actually stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. We see Gameking and Metranos both have 1 row weather clear in their hand. There's the Kidweni Sergeant for Metranos, and there's the Vryhead for Gameking. Now, this can be influential because it means that you're going to naturally stack up on 1 row to avoid taking too much damage. However, Gameking is by far and away the player with the advantage in terms of movement. He can move cards very, very easily around the board, and also he's got that Trapper to really punish a row stack, and that Trapper has done work for him already in this tournament, and we could see it being put to great use here as well.
Look at this decision here. A decision to get another weather clear against Metranos, who's running some pretty devastating weather, or another gold weather himself. Going to go ahead and take that gold weather as opposed to taking a weather clear. Kind of hard to pass up on a gold card when Yevon is showing it to you. So that does make a lot of sense. And we've seen an open pass. We've seen long. Basically 2 pressure plays in the gold weather, and then we've seen spies. It feels like no cards have really been played yet, but we're already kind of getting into round 2 here, and more spy play. It's really this is really all about who can get the last say here with card advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. You're 100% correct there. I think that actually I really like the decision Gameking made going for that second golden weather because he knows that he won't be punished for row stacking, whereas Metranos doesn't have that luxury. So like in that instance, the likelihood is Metranos would have went for the additional weather clear.
Yeah.
And I really like the idea of going for a second golden weather here because if he can get those sergeants out and then bring Drought into a long round, it's going to be such a powerful play for Gameking.
Yeah, and I really like how Gameking is able to set up the golden weather, encourage a rose stack to maybe minimize the value that weather can't apply for himself, but then again punish with the trapper when that rose stack occurs. So that vertical and horizontal punishment that Scoia'tael is able to do, we did see Randy of Sintra running a pyrotechnician deck that also kind of functioned on the same idea, where it doesn't matter what you do, I'm going to move you around if I want to, I'm going to hit you in different rows, I'm going to hit you on the same row, and I actually really liked that deck that Randy brought. It was a little bit different flavor here of Brewer, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the nice things that Scoia'tael can try to do here, as I think we're going to see with the Marksman, is you can try to take out the crewman. If you disable Henselt's crewman, it is such a monumentally impactful thing to do. And that's why we even see him just taking that armor off. Even though he's actually sacrificing value on that marksman immediately, what he's doing is he's going to make it easier for him to then move that sergeant into the weather and kill it. Because if you can disable crewmans, he's got Kieran to disable another one, you really, really hurt the power. Because it doesn't hurt battering rams as much, but ballistas, where their crewman effect is to repeat the deploy ability, it is such a huge blow to lose that.
Yeah, it is huge. Like the amount, especially because it's going to be fairly easy for Metranos to find those shelves of points, at least by creating them, and then of course having multiple ballistas. Ballistas create additional value for later ballistas. As I love the term that you used last time we cast, that setting up that crewman pocket between the Kidweni Siege support and the Kidweni Sergeant. And one of the silver cards that Gameking was talking a lot about that he loves, not just Iris but also Scorch. How do you feel a Scorch is going to play in this matchup now that Yavin is being pummeled by the Ragnarok, and it looks like a lot of the large units are actually going to be on Gameking's side?
Yeah, this is a really poor matchup for Scorch. I'd say that Henselt is actually arguably the roughest leader to play it against, because he doesn't care about the points of his own units, right? He cares about stripping away your power with those ballistas, with those battering rams. And realistically, the maximum that you're going to see a Henselt play is probably going to be, outside of putting a spy on his board, it's going to be 8 or 9 strength. It's not really going to be much whatsoever. So you can get them to sync up, sure, but when you're playing Scoia'tael, which also features a lot of mid-range cards, quite often you'll find you'd also Scorch yourself, or it's just simply not available due to your board being full of like 8 strength brigades and whatnot. So Scorch is a very, very rough card in this matchup, and it's not actually a great one at all.
I think that Gameking does have an opportunity as Metranos will have to win this round to go into round 3 to Scorch the first unit that Metranos plays in round 3. On the contrary, though, Metranos can lead off with a White Frost, which would force Gameking to play his unit first and likely automatically have the larger unit on the board. So it's going to have to be a very careful decision on when to use Scorch. If, like right now, we can see that Taller is going to be hogging that spot for the foreseeable future. So that is likely not going to be able to be played this round. And Metranos knows that Gameking is running Scorch. So right now, that Scorch target being on Gameking's side of the board essentially deadens the card completely. And Metranos already has the card advantage. So Gameking's going to have to play this round and get the pass just right.
Absolutely. That's such a key point to pick up on. Scorching the first unit, especially if disrupting those crewmen, is just a really, really powerful thing to do. So yeah, I would expect to see Scorch sort of traded for minimal, yet still useful value round 3, or it could potentially be thrown away depending on how far he goes in this round.
Yeah, it seems like because we see the White Frost, it seems like Metranos, and likely because of weather being more valuable the longer it is on the board, Metranos leading off with the White Frost does make a lot of sense. If of course, is for whatever reason it wouldn't be applied in this round, as long as the 2 drought rows are available at this point. But with that leadoff, that would definitely make this a very risky card to keep, Scorch, that is.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think the White Frost is really interesting. It's actually, conversely in this matchup, White Frost is actually really good against Scoia'tael, because once the faction of agility everywhere, Scoia'tael actually has among the fewest agile cards now. So they still have row-locked cards. Like you see 2 in his hand. You've got Barclay Els and you've got the Trapper as well, both of which would have to be placed into frosted rows if you played that on the range row.
Right, so you can make the option, when you decide if you want to play White Frost first, you can say, okay, well, I'll play it on the range in the siege row, and at the very least, I know that there's going to be some units that are going to play it into it, so there's going to be a fair amount of value. And then, of course, on top of all of that, Henselt has all of the controlling nature, plus the Geralt Ard to push into the weather. So there's a lot to do here. Gameking is going to... He's hovering over the coin at this point. He's down a card, and he's up in points. Metranos would have to play a card to even things out, and we go into round 3. So this will be the deciding round for the first game in the finals here at Gwentslam 2.
Yeah, I really like this pass from Gameking. I think it's smart. I think he's whittled his hand down to a pretty pretty precise place to be. He's got the Operator for the Agitator. He's got some really powerful cards in hand, Scorch to open up with, like you said. If he can manage to like slip something under, like, and just get that Scorch, that's going to be so good. Like, if he could maybe hit even like 2 units with that, that would be absolutely game-winning. But it's a very tricky thing to do when even that Agitator is going to bring out a 7-strength unit. The only way I could see him doing it was if he just like chucked the Trapper, basically.
Metranos has no problem getting over this 38 points of Gameking. It's just how he wants to do it is the decision. What is going to be most value to him in round 3? Likely, I mean, you could have made a case for. Well, I mean, all of these cards are henseltable at this point. That's right. I created that word. And you got the Ballista. You have the Battering Ram as well, and of course that Weather Clear is going to be valuable. I think as potentially. Well, we know that because we know that the drought in Gameking's hand is going to be threatening in what's going to be a fairly long round 3.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this drought's going to really do a lot of damage. I mean, he does have the 1k Veni Sergeant, but with those mercenaries throwing units left, right, and center, and even the brigade's able to do so, it's going to be really, really tough for Metranos to not take serious attrition damage from this drought. And then when added to the fact that he's got things like trappers and stuff, Trapper makes playing drought kind of tricky because obviously the trappers are 1 strength, so it'll die to the drought. But when they clear a row and row stack with the Cade Veni Sergeant, it just lines it up perfectly for you. So weirdly, Trapper actually is kind of good with gold weathers, but the double Cade Venis could be a problem for Gameking.
This might be the Scorch. This might potentially be the Scorch if Shawnee comes down to bring back a Cadweni Siege support. I mean, it's not. Think about the long-term value of this Scorch and how many more opportunities you have to play it. Gameking might have to make the decision to play it, but of course, playing the Drought is obviously just fine because there are still only units on Metranos' side of the board. He can be a little patient there. It's just until he decides to play that unit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the Drought's like the perfect card to go with there, right? You want to start the damage, it's going to hit the lowest unit, so it's going to maintain your Scorch value, and there you go. He immediately gets 2 more points worth of value on his Scorch.
But he actually loses a little bit of value because that Cadweni Siege support will actually create far more points. So, and also it's still, I mean, it's not really, well, Henselt is used, so I forget what I said about Henselt before. I'll just retract that statement, of course. But it looks like that Scorch is just going to be held onto, and it creates the 10 on the board, and that's a little risky now.
Yeah, absolutely. What he wants to do here is he wants to stop double crewmans being set up, because if you get that double crewman, you're firing huge battering rams, huge ballistas. You just can't have that. So the siege support also adding tempo on every single play makes it an obvious target for an early move into the Drought to get it off the board.
Gameking's units are split up nicely enough that White Frost will be missing one of those things, should that be a decision. But of course, having this extra weather clear is pretty key. Being able to nullify 2/3 of the potential that Drought can offer and just avoid that last row. Avoid as best as you can, of course, against a movement deck, that is.
Yeah, of course. You can sort of briefly step out, but they're going to throw you straight back in. So that is going to be the last weather clear that we see for Metranos, meaning that the middle row will be able to have units moved into it for them to take damage. But at the same time, Gameking also wants to see one of the other rows stacked so that he can utilize that Trapper to its full effect. And it looks like we're going to see Barclay Ellis is coming down for a little bit of tempo, getting a mercenary. He's going to put that siege support right back in the Drought to get it dying.
So Brewer is coming down just for kind of value as opposed to actually like some of the utility that you might see from Brewer being able to play Yavin or something, or Kieran in other matchups. At this point, there were only so many options. Only the Bronze Dwarves were available. So getting that Agitator out with the Dwarven Mercenary does allow a limited lifespan on the Cadweni Siege support. This seems like a pretty good time to go and apply this because as every turn passes, that White Frost is losing value, and there's a lot of power in Metranos' hand at this point. And that Scorch, I'm looking at that 10 strength mercenary, and I'm wondering if how this is going to play out.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, actually, even with the Dead Scorch, I quite like Gameking's hand because of the Operator-Agitator combo just being so fantastic, but that Scorch is very harmful. One of the things that is nice for Gameking is that if Geralt Ard was played and thrown it into the Frost, because it was the only right now it would be the only target for Ard to move into a weather, so it would have added value. That would actually open up his Scorch. And Metranos knows this matchup very well, so he may potentially think that Gameking wouldn't keep his Scorch, because it's very awkward to play in this matchup. But if we saw the Mercenary and the Brigade, he would be lining up for his own Scorch, but there's a chance that he does get to play it.
That would be a high-level kind of psychological situation if Metranos was like, well, there's be no way that Gameking would create the highest unit here and hold on to Scorch at the same time.
If that Scorch does get open, though, it's going to be fierce.
Yeah, it is, because there's a lot of lineup here with the 8s.
There's the Dwarven Agitator Operator. Probably the easiest and best use of that card nowadays.
A useless card for your opponent, easily outside of a mirror, which we did see. We did see a Squirtle mirror where the Operator was used just to get out of my hand, just play it after the pass or some other thing. But in this situation, giving your opponent a 2-strength card is pretty fantastic because it just represents it's basically like giving yourself an extra turn.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an extra turn for so little. I mean, the thing is, it does give Metranos more time to delay, so he can sort of like stave off some of the movement effects that may be targeting like that Siege Master or the Ballista. But this is looking like if Metranos missteps, he's going to find himself in a very dangerous situation.
Those agitators represent a lot of strength. I do believe that there is still a Dwarven Mercenary in the deck, so that will represent two copies of that mercenary, and then of course the Trapper can ultimately be played much later when the rows have been established and moved around by those mercenaries. So at this point, it's really just play your mercenaries, line up the row, line up the Trapper, and pray you can get a Scorch.
Yeah, but I mean, even the Trapper right now is looking a little bit sad because of the armor that comes on those Cade Veni Sergeants. I mean, yeah, I think we're going to see like the Agitator moved up to the Siege Row just so that it does enable that. Or we could even just use it for the buff. It's probably just going to be a proactive buff, but yeah, it's looking like both players are in a somewhat awkward position, but just based on the sheer points value in Metranos' hand, I quite like the position he's in. That Ard represents quite a bit of value.
That armor really helps Metranos in this particular situation, for sure. He's going to just go ahead and just buff his own units in this case. Obviously, because the armor is going to absorb a lot of the damage that the Trapper's Fireball Trap would apply on that row, it's probably just more of a sure thing to go ahead and just buff your own units.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 armor is like the perfect amount. Don't even need any more. It's going to stop that Trapper in its tracks. It's just such a core thing right now. That Cade Veni Sergeant, like, honestly, the armor that CDPR have been given to cards, really proving its value here, because the only way that I can see Gameking very confidently taking this is if somehow that 10 power mercenary is damaged.
And we're talking about how playing the mercenary and being able to buff your own units is probably better to combat the armor. It doesn't change the fact that there is still a Trapper in Gameking's hand and also a Scorch that can't be played. So Gameking is running out of options here to actually apply an amount of strength that's going to combat what Ard is going to be able to do, as well as a Ballista Shot. As we see a lot of 5s lined up here, there's going to be a fair amount of power here. I don't know if Gameking's going to be able to play these cards with a lot of efficiency.
No, absolutely not. This is going to be a triple Ballista Shot when that Siege Master comes down. It's going to come down to the other side of that Ballista, set up the Crewman Pocket, and it's going to fire 3 times on 5 targets for unbelievable value. Gameking is not looking to be in a good position whatsoever right now.
And there's really only so much he can do, right? Like the only line of play is really just hope to get as much value as you possibly can from the Trapper, and if that 10 just stays there, pass on the Scorch. So Metranos, the only thing that can save him is if he pushes that mercenary into the only thing that can save Gameking, I think, is if he plays Ard now
and
pushes the mercenary in. But now doesn't even need to do that. You lose a little bit of value pushing the Agitator, or well, I guess you just damage the units on the Siege Row instead if you just wanted to be absolutely sure that you were protected against the Scorch. So Metranos can make a fine decision, play Ard now, as long as he does not touch that 10 strength unit.
Yeah, and surely he won't touch the 10 strength. He knows that's there blocking the Scorch. He knows the Scorch is around. And there we go. We see that 10 strength mercenary is not going to be subject to Ard. Instead, it's going to launch the weaker one to take damage from the Frost. And that really is just going to be an impossible position for Gameking to come back from. This triple Ballista Shot is just going to be ruthless.
Your bet will avenge us, Dwan.
So the Trap's going to go down. It's going to lose a little bit of strength because of the 3 armor there, but it is going to be in siege support. The Cade Veni Siege Master, does need to come down on the other side of the Ballista to create that extra crewman, and that is worthwhile. It's a little bit of extra value on the Trap, but the amount of units that it can hit, there's just too many units that are lined up here. Gameking's just, what do you do?
Yeah, it's going to be hitting for its max targets of 5 on every single shot, and that is just going to be absolute the end for Gameking. I mean, that mercenary getting strengthened up is not what he wants.
The Trap's not going to be enough here, and it's, of course, the attrition of the Frost on top of all of that. Gameking can't do it. Face in hand. I think we're going to come right back to us. There's not much more to see, really. Do you think that the best play for Gameking was to actually execute that Scorch on the Cade Veni Siege Shard, after the Drought was played, and just execute the Scorch as soon as possible?
Yeah.
Or do you think that actually, points-wise, Gameking was already in a rough position anyway?
I think in a near impossible situation to hit a Scorch, he got 2 opportunities to hit a Scorch, and didn't take either of them.
Yeah.
Like, of course, it's like that sounds overly harsh. It's very easy to like see the potential future value of Scorch. But you've got to be realistic in those situations and say, look, we're playing with units that are all the same strength.
Yeah.
So if I get a chance to Scorch, I'm going to take it. As soon as that first Sergeant came down, should have been Scorched, in my opinion. But hindsight is 2020, and Gameking handled that extremely well in what can be a very tough matchup. So that was a fascinatingly close first game and an excellent start to the series.
I don't think that GameKing's going to have a hard time eventually winning with that Bruverhook deck, so it's just the fact that Metranos got through with Henselt here. It's actually interesting now, the Henselt list probably being the worst matchup for Aridin is now no longer going to be an option as Henselt has won. It is now out of the Conquest format, so Aridin can now be played and maybe feel just a little bit more comfortable as it doesn't have to go up against Henselt.
Yeah, potentially. I think that would definitely be the case in a regular lineup, but just with that Cracksman deck. I feel like Aridin is going to get severely punished against that Cracksman deck because what it does is running like the triple lacerates, double herbalist. There is just so much row and area removal that any monster's gameplay is not going to be fun against it. So I feel like, Henselt is another extremely rough match for Aridin, but it's not exactly clear. It's not smooth sailing for him for here on out.
Yeah, I mean, Gameking does have a point now down. It is 1-0 in the matchup here for Metranos versus Gameking in the Gwentslam #2 finals for the crown points, for the prize pool, and the trophy, which we will be handing out as soon as the series is over. We've already had a lot of great series happen today. We did see Freddy Babes and Gameking face off once again, and Metranos and Super JJ in an epic 2-hour best-of-5 battle that was very, very close. So we expect this series to be still the highlight because I'm already pretty impressed. That Henselt list did a pretty good job there, and Gameking kind of beaten by his own Scorch a little bit there, but there was just so much power in Metranos' hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the Machine Health has honestly been doing such great work. And it sounds like we're going to go into a Kraken Crate versus Bruverhook. So Gameking sticking with his Bruverhook, which I think is the correct decision to do, because actually the amount of movement is really going to help against something that punishes rows and uses gold weather as much as this crack deck.
Absolutely. I mean, I have been excited to see this deck again for sure. I didn't get a chance to cast the last one, but I did watch it with intensity because it's very unique, I think. And I mean, you've played a little bit with Croc Axeman before, but this is a little bit different, though. I think that some of the choices that are made here are pretty unique and good use of the Herbalist, triple Lacerate, double Herbalist as well. Of course, Restore coming in, making this deck, giving that a little boost over the course of the pro season, giving that just a little bit of extra boost. It's pretty hard to not run Restore in any of the Skellige decks at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Restore is just like, a lot is said about that card. Everybody knows it's just like an auto lock for Skellige for very obvious reasons. You can just turn even simple things like Priestess of Phrase, you discard. They're great targets. It's a fantastic card. But yeah, I really love this Cracksman deck. I've actually played with like this a little bit before I came here, and it's really a lot of fun. I don't include the Shieldsmith. I'm kind of intrigued by the Shieldsmith. I'm not really too sure. I mean, it's good on Morkvarg, sure, and it's good at rearmoring, but there is just so much. Like, if you look at every card in Metranos' hand, they're just all designed to like punish you for playing units on the board, with the exception of like Priestess of Freya and like Shieldsmith.
Really,
it's incredible.
It's true. I mean, it could just be just a little bit of extra protection from Morkvarg, and of course, just get a little bit of extra value from Morkvarg. It seems like, I mean, there is also a single Armorsmith as well in Metranos' case, which is definitely kind of serves a similar role in that it's just going to give you that little extra boost when you need it, especially against weather, as we are seeing once again double gold weather applied. We have seen this. We've seen this a number of times in this matchup. Just kind of trying to cancel each other out here as clears need to be applied, but no clears in sight.
Yeah, that was
an
absolutely catastrophic roach as well, because the problem here is that if Metranos lacerates that row, it will clear the entire row. Roach will die, and Gameking will not have the pass because of the placement of that roach.
Yeah, really, it'll just set everything back to 0 here, as Kraken Crate's going to come out to bring Morkvarg out of the deck, and then, of course, from there, it's just going to be about maybe developing those Axemen, trying to get as much value as possible, pushing Gameking out of the round with just a snowbally amount of points.
Yeah, we're going to start seeing the weather clears come in now, and honestly, I would actually like to see Metranos take the opportunity to lacerate these Blue Mountain Commandos before they're moved, because these really add a lot of tempo to things like Dwarven Mercenaries, and if you can get them all in one place and lacerate them off the board before they start getting those buffs, it's a really, really, really useful thing in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the weather is much more of a larger concern to Game King than trying to move any of these commandos, and you wouldn't be moving them into weather, probably, if you could help it. So, really, I mean, even though you clear the weather, the option to move them into weather isn't appealing in the first place. So even though you do get that buff, it is something that probably Metranos might be a little bit more confident about not being a huge threat. But I do agree that this is probably a great time to use Last Rate. When you have 3 Last Rates in your deck, I mean, Metranos can be a little bit more patient, actually set up the Axeman on the Siege Row as well. But there is like the opportunity that the Axeman would get removed as Morkvar gets locked, increasing the value of Ragnarok as well with the moving onto the Siege Row.
Yeah, really great lock coming in from Kieran there, not only increasing that attrition damage, but also denying the Morkvarg is such a fantastic thing to do in any Skellige matchup. Any Skellige deck you're against, most of them run Morkvarg. If you can take that out of the game, it's a big, big swing in your favor. But he's just kind of letting the drought damage tick along instead of going for the weather clear, which I find pretty interesting. He may be trying to avoid having too many units on that row because he knows that there are so many lacerates out there for him. But how do you see Game King proceeding into this round if he doesn't want to play into those lacerates?
I think that it's hard to not play into the last rate when you can only clear 1 row at a time, and you don't necessarily. It's not beneficial for you to stay in the row, and it's not appealing to move out of the row. So now with the Axeman down, now the snowball has started to roll down the mountain at this point. So the last rate is very, very appealing for Metranos next turn, and I think Game King knows that. So, but I really don't know if there's a lot that can be done at this point outside of actually moving the Axeman to a different row.
No, I mean, like you mentioned earlier, even if you move the Axeman, you're going to be playing into weather, right? And if you use your brigade to do it, you're just going to be leaving your other cards in weather. So no real ideal solution here, but I'm going to see a nice Yavin come down, to be honest. That's actually pretty good. Placing it, increasing the attrition damage, but I don't expect to see Game King stay in this round for too much longer.
Yeah, being able to, I guess, in this case, this is a reversal of the coin flip with the Yavin being played here, so Metranos would now be going down to continue into this round, but I think that you're fine to do that just because of a lot of the late. Like the great thing about Metranos' deck is that not only does it have a lot of long round potential, it has a lot of short round potential in the common stuff that you might see like Sigurdrifa on a 10-point Dora Garay or a Restore coming out as well. And plus, with the weather on top of the fact like Burn a Brand is in this deck, we didn't see it. We haven't seen it too much, but it is around, and there's just so many options for Metranos in a long round, and then ultimately having Restore available is huge.
Yeah, so there we go. The Lacerate surely putting the nail in the coffin of this round for Game King. I mean, losing those BMCs, losing so many point value, being 22 points down, even with 4 damage coming in from that Ragnarok. Can you see a way for Game King to claw himself back into this round?
Well, I mean, I think it could be definitely not getting ahead at this point, which would put Metranos in a position where he could pass, but Metranos can just stay in this round. It just gets worse and worse for Game King. So I would have to say that it is difficult for Game King to really see a path to not so much claw back in, but actually get ahead and stay ahead. It's just with the Axeman there and no real way to really disrupt it in any favorable way. Like you said, leaving your units to die in the weather or putting your own units into the weather. Looks like Game King's going to maybe play the Marksman, because Zoltan with a Marksman on the board is a lot of points. Also, ultimately, Game King does have Aglace. So Aglace Restore is one of the most devastating ways to deal with Skellige. But he would have to, I mean, Metranos knows this, so the timing of Restore is going to be very crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. The Restore, honestly, I think you're 100% right. I don't expect to see the Restore come down until Metranos is very sure that it won't get immediately turned in his face. But right now, I'm interested by this Marksman play. It's just taking the armor off of the Axeman, making it a little bit easier to kill, soften it up a little bit. So he's going to be 11 points behind. He does have 4 points of damage ticking. Do you think that we maybe see like, he could go for Zoltan? Like, Zoltan would be a big swing, but Metranos has so many answers for it.
It's just so much investment in a round that's going to be really hard to win, even if you play all of these cards, all of these high-value cards. And there's so much happening in this round right now. We have weather on all sides of the board. We have the Axeman that is going to be snowballing. There's a lot of meat on that siege row for the Axeman to get points off of. Plus, the Herbalist is available. Metranos is going to go ahead and actually pass because he is in a great position with points here. Game King has to invest to get in this. And by playing the Marksman, which is a fairly slow play with Metranos already having that lead and going to additionally get more points as the round goes back, because the Axeman will get some more points from the Drought's damage. Game King's investment here is going to be pretty big. It's going to have to be Zoltan, and if that's even enough.
Yeah, so we're going to see Zoltan come down here. I believe it was going to be either Zoltan or Bruiser Hoog to take the round. He's going to go for the buffing as well as increasing the damage to that Ragnarok. So it is going to be enough to take him it, but honestly, it's a very, very expensive way to take a round. Zoltan is a big finisher that you like to play when you've got numerous marksmen out on the board in round 3. Right now, Gameking has just spent some pretty core cards to take this round 1.
Yeah, his body language is showing that he probably agrees with you there because that is a huge investment. Bruverhook still being available for maybe a little bit more flexibility, pulling something like Kieran or one of the other utility cards that he may want to play to maybe help himself out of this. Of course, ultimately sourcing one of the agitators at the very, very worst, which is still pretty good. Double Herbalist for the 2 remaining Lacerates in Metranos' hand. Metranos, at this point, being up a card right now, at this point, it's really, he should have not a lot of problems being able to stay in this round and stay ahead, and ultimately can just finish off with Restore. The thing about Aglace is, if you just hold on to Restore, I mean, Aglace might get a White Frost, and that might be okay, but all of that, it pales in comparison to what Aglace Restore can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gameking showing, as you said from his body language, he's very frustrated with the current state of the game. I think that his hand is, it's just lacking power, right? I mean, there are good cards in there. Mercenaries are good cards. He's got a Weather Clear, but he doesn't necessarily have the points to win the game in his hand. And I think he knows that. So he's going to try to bleed Metranos out because, of course, Axemen love a long round 3 where they can let all that damage go crazy. But Gameking is in a rough position, and it looks like he knows it.
I mean, we can see Metranos' hand. I firmly believe that if Gameking is putting Metranos on a hand like he has, doing an open pass here to get cards back simply just isn't an option. Gold Weather plus a backup White Frost if anything gets cleared. Double Lacerate with an Axeman in hand. Geralt Ard to do a ton of damage on top of assisting with any Axeman buffing. And then finally Restore would seal the deal. So Gameking is going to have to try to find a way to make a favorable pass, but Metranos can. Metranos does have to invest some of those tools, his long round tools, into this. But ultimately, I think it's going to be the short round that Metranos is able to execute that maybe will potentially get him the win here.
Absolutely, but one of the really key components of that short round for Scoia'tael is that Zoltan Chevet, and we've seen that already have to come out to get him round 1. So I feel like, yeah, Gameking wants to whittle him down to a short round, like 3 or 4 cards, maybe as the sweet spot. He's going to be looking for that Scorch as well, because that Scorch can just be so amazingly useful, especially as it can counter things like things getting healed by the Armor Smiths, because that attrition damage, once Armor Smiths are in play, is no longer reliable, because you're never sure when it's going to get turned around and just immediately healed up. So Metranos has a lot of answers to the current state of this round, but I think for Gameking's sake, he's going to be looking a lot at what he draws in round 3.
He's putting a lot of thought into his approach and that he's going to stay into this round. Metranos just opting to weather the board to make this a little bit more unfavorable for Gameking to stay into it. At this point, Gameking also has to commit his resources, and he's going to pass, and this could be huge for Metranos.
Yeah, Metranos is going to be very happy looking at that pass, but actually, looking at the cards in his hand, Metranos has to spend quite significantly to take this one, you know. He can't do it with an Axeman. He can't do it with an Armor Smith because there's only 2 Ragnarok damage coming down. He's got to spend actually a pretty decent card. We could see the Restore come out here. We could see Geralt Ard.
I don't know about the Restore.
I don't think we're going to see the Restore. It would be suicide, but what do you spend outside of that? You play Ard to take the round?
I honestly believe that if he wants to do this in a card, that is the best option, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that actually he has enough sort of damage with that double Herbalist Lacerates coming in that I think he can afford to spend Ard. I'm not saying there's not a painful blow, but I think he can spend Ard and still be in a relatively comfortable position.
Now, the last card, is not going to be in Metranos' favor, so he will have to play Restore. If Aglace is saved as the last card, that could actually end up being what Gameking gets this done. He's going to actually commit that Ard. It is the way he had to do it, but being on even cards at this point, it's risky right now, and I really don't think Gameking has any reason to play Aglace anything but the last card to take the round.
Yeah, absolutely. He's going to be loving that Aglace right now because when you have that final say, there are very few better plays in the game than the Aglace into Restore right now. So that's a really, really powerful incentive for Gameking to keep the point margin close, make sure he can do it. So we see him thinking of throwing the Restore, and he's going to do it.
He does it. Oh, man.
And he gets a fantastic Scorch block out. Immediately, Ulderich will be blocking that Scorch, making it impossible for Gameking to shut down these Axemen until they're very, very big.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely blocks the Scorch. That will deaden it. And dropping the Restore, now that takes some confidence. But really, that's how you would lose the game.
Absolutely.
Being on even cards, as soon as that occurred, that was a liability for that card to be in Metranos' hand.
He is here.
Yeah, he knew it.
Let's take a look here. He's going to get Dorgaray, which is the obvious choice there. The Shieldsmith, like Gameking just taking a peek. That Shieldsmith going to go in the graveyard. I agree with you. It's the value of the Shieldsmith. I'm sure that there's, being able to apply it to Morkvarg is probably just a way to get extra value in your carryover. But with Morkvarg locked and at this state of the game, no need to have it. That's why we saw it mulligan before and discarded now as the Gold Weather goes down for Gameking.
Yeah, I mean, this is a strong Gold Weather. I mean, it is going to be rough for Metranos to play into this. I think we're just going to see him reply with his own weather. We could see White Frost come down, but the more that White Frost hits that Ulderic, the easier it's going to be for Gameking to hit a Scorch. Even if he just hits 7s, that's good. That's value. He'll take that. Like, the White Frost, it did have to be the reply, right? Because you can't put the first units down because then you're providing the first targets. But it is kind of nice for Gameking actually to have that Ulderic lowered a little. And
also, I want to make sure that you guys understand that putting Restore away is very good, but it doesn't make a Glace dead by any means. There's Lacerates in the graveyard, and I mean, White Frost with the Drought on the board is likely not going to be taken, but those Lacerates, the Lacerate can still get a lot of value as well. Especially Metranos is encouraged to probably stack the Rose to minimize the damage that Drought plays. So he's actually going to be playing into the Lacerate that he's put in his own graveyard that Agalace can source. So that still could be a card that cripples Metranos in this matchup.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that he does have the... This is interesting because he has the Armor Smith, but he was planning on that repairing some Drought damage, I imagine, but now it may be repairing Lacerate damage. However, a Glace, even if you just hit 2 units with Lacerate, that turns a Glace into a 15 value card. I mean, that card is really, really very, very good. It's very powerful. So, it's far from dead. It's still a fantastic gold card. It's no longer the sort of, game ender that it would have been with Restore, but it's still a very powerful gold card in the hand of Gameking and Metranos not having any golds right now.
And once again, we're seeing Gameking having no problem moving Ulderic, moving a unit and creating a larger unit. Like we talked about how the Frost limits the ability to actually block the Scorch. Gameking is fine just putting a large unit on the board with the Scorch in hand because he's probably very confident that the Axeman is, you either play your Axeman early and you get that value, or you don't play it and you don't get the value. And the whole point of playing the Axeman is to have that snowbally value, which the Scorch is able to create. But the Priestess of Freya should be able to stagger, and of course, Gameking has a lot of ways, but Gameking still has a lot of ways to adjust the rows to his favor. So, the positioning is going to be very surgical here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the best thing is, when he lines up that Ulderic with the Mercenary, he's saying, yeah, I've got the biggest unit on the board, but if you want to play your strategy, you're going to have to hit it. Like, he knows that there's going to be Lacerates flying left, right, and center, but he knows that he's going to get an opportunity to Scorch that Axeman at some point. And you can't Armorsmith repair a Scorch. No. So it's going to be a very, very important card in this game. And a fantastic operator use coming out here.
Yeah, once again, kind of like we talked about before, it buys you a full turn at the cost of the low bargain price of 2 points that your opponent getting a useless bronze card, essentially, especially when they have to play it into Drought, just basically a 0-point play. So, I mean, there's not much that Metranos can do about that. It's starting, I feel like I'm starting to lean more towards Gameking's potential in this game, not just because of the ability to Scorch one of the large Axemen potentially, but also what Aglace can do and what these agitators can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's a very close game right now because the double Lacerates from the Herbalists will be devastating. Even if the Axeman is countered, that Lacerate will be doing serious damage. However, the Savage Bear coming out from Dorgaray, yes. So, yeah. Always love it when a bear comes out, but it's like, it's a very close match right now. I mean, the Agitator, right, has to be like, it's a great play. Like, the Agitator is another mercenary. It's going to do a lot of value. That is a crushing blow right now as well.
So that Axeman is now, it's taking damage. It's not getting a lot back because of now, it only affects the row on the opposite side. The bear premium,
it like bucks.
It looks like the bear's having a sneezing fit a little bit. We've seen some funny premium animations in this particular land client that we've got here for Gwentslam 2. Try not to let that distract you too much.
It's like hypnotizing. I'm just like staring straight at it.
Oh, man. Yeah, but the fact that the Axeman is now, got a little bit less value here. I mean, there's still potential to get the Axeman to, a respectable amount of strength. And, of course, the Priestess of Freya can get one of the other Axemen out, as we're seeing that exact play. And, the Harpooner is going to represent a lot of value here. But, at some point, that Scorch is going to have to be played. I feel like I'm telling the same story from last time. It's more likely that Gameking is going to get a target this time around, so holding on to it and being patient is a little bit more realistic this time. But, that Scorch is, I keep looking at like where it's actually going to land. And really, as far as like the silver slot is concerned, is it actually getting Gameking the value that he wants to get in this tournament?
I think that Scorch is a funny one right now because there's certain matchups where it's absolutely beastly. Against Nilfgaard, fantastic card, takes down all the brigades on the board essentially because it's actually quite difficult to stagger brigades. They're very often lined up. It's also pretty good in this matchup. I think that he will definitely get value from it in this, and also it's about potential value, right? Because once you Scorch the Axeman, how much value are you denying in the future? Very similar to like even scorching like Imperial forces at the beginning of a game is very, very powerful. So Scorch can deny a lot of potential value. But there are certain matchups like we saw against that Henselt where it's just horrible to try to hit it.
Now, Gameking, once again, is you could make an argument that maybe you would want the Axeman to grow. Like you would be happy with that Axeman growing because of the Scorch.
I think the problem is how that Axeman grows is by Gameking tanking horrible lacerates.
Yeah.
And even if he gets to Scorch that Axeman, the lacerate is going to be doing 12 value a hit right now, which is significant. Like if you take a 12 damage lacerate and then you Scorch a 12 power Axeman, you still took a 12 power lacerate, you know.
It's true.
So I think that he's just keeping that in mind. He's comfortably ahead on points right now. There's no need to keep an Axeman in a potentially greedy position.
Going to go and heal that bear right back up again, so it still gets, there's a lot of long-term value in some of the stuff that Metranos is playing, not just the Axeman, but that Savage Bear, playing it a little bit earlier into the row, and of course, being able to play that weather. So, like, a lot of this damage has been passive from Metranos' side, and exactly what you want to have happen with the Axeman style of deck. And of course, being able to punish the row, we know that 2 lacerates are still going to come out because those 2 Herbalists are just waiting. That row's getting juicier and juicier. That Harpooner is going to help. That Agitator is basically just going to die on impact, so that's just going to buy Metranos a little bit of time. It's possible that he just decides to throw it at some point because he's going to have to play it at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I actually quite like Metranos' hand right now because bear in mind that Trapper cannot be played because it can be played for 6 points, but the Trap will immediately die to the Drought in addition to the fact that everything is armored. And outside of that, we see Aglace is going to be going on a lacerate, probably on a row with like 2, potentially maybe 3 units on it. And then he has the Scorch. So if Metranos splits up his lacerates, doesn't put all of his power into one Axeman, it's honestly pretty legit.
Metranos opted to put something into the Frost just to get a little bit of extra value here. But in doing that, actually now creates an opportunity for Gameking to get a Scorch off. Next turn, that Axeman will get Scorched because Udalric will go down to 8. The Axeman will go up to 12 at least. That may have been the play that costs him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that Axeman getting Scorched is going to hurt, but I really do think like the value of these lacerates is pretty high.
Yeah.
10 strength on both the melee and the siege row right now, in addition to the 2 that you get from the Herbalists. However, those will die to the Drought. So it's a really tough game. This is a Glace, though.
Not putting Metranos on keeping the Restore in his hand. That's really something.
That's an incredible read by Gameking. He recognizes that it would have come out already.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good read.
That's an
I don't have anything else to
read.
say. It's a really, really, really good read. That's why Gameking is where he is right now, in the finals right now, fighting for his life. He does have Udalric is still there. I think I'm maybe too fixated. I should maybe stop talking about the Scorch. I'm super fixated on that card right now.
Well, it's the clutch moment of this round, though, right? I mean, essentially what we're doing is buying time until the Scorch is played, because the Scorch is the defining moment of this round. And there he goes. There you go. You can be happy. You can cast it. Go. It's finally happening.
Here comes the Scorch. That Axeman's going to burn.
So yeah, that actually got Scorched. So, there's going to be no way back into this for Metranos. That Drought attrition is just, even the nice lacerates are not going to be enough to take it.
All right, so
the Great Mother's grace is
those lacerates are going to come down. I mean, at this point, the Axemen are going to get a lot of value here. The Trapper is going to just drop a trap into the Drought, but yeah, you were right. The lacerates just aren't going to quite get there. This one definitely was a little bit of a roller coaster as far as I was looking at how things were going to go, where Metranos was going to decide to move stuff, where Gameking was going to decide to move stuff. The weather just always ticking. There was a lot happening there, and it ultimately really kind of got into Gameking. It's pretty decisive win at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love the Aglace read there. He was like, nah, you haven't got Restore anymore. You threw it. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Gameking is just an absolute sublime player. But he actually handled himself very well in that game. We visually saw him get frustrated early on in that game, but he kept his composure and he turned it around and he got the win, and he's tied it up at 1-1. I mean, this series is now going to be playing for who can take the lead.
Now, it's interesting, just like we talked about with Henselt and Monsters not being a matchup that will occur anymore, where Henselt would arguably have, a lot of potential to take that matchup very favorable. The Scoia'tael and Axeman matchup, now that has occurred. That Glace really hindered what Metranos could have done with the Restore, but now Metranos has free reign to actually get a chance to win with this deck because that matchup is pretty rough. And it looked like Metranos had potential to take that one, but ultimately Gameking pulls it out with Brewer.
Yeah, absolutely. That was Gameking's dream, queuing into that with his Brewer. That's like one of the best matchups for it. However, Metranos, it is worth mentioning, is targeting monsters. Him getting wins against the other factions right now is essentially just kind of like nice for him, right?
A little extra cash.
Yeah, it's a little bonus. He is aiming to defeat that Brand deck. No, not the Brand deck. He's aiming to defeat the Eridan deck.
The Eridan deck.
Yeah, the one that's a monsters leader. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's just really looking to he's like, yeah, you could beat my crack with Brewer. Whatever, man. Queue in with your Eridan and see what happens. So that's how the targeting nature of Conquest works. It's a very unique format in that it does allow players to do that. So Metranos is biding his time and waiting for when he sees that Eridan. But it's going to be an interesting matchup next. I mean, what do you go with if you're Gameking now? Because you know that crack's lurking. You haven't seen too much yet, but what do you go for?
I feel like if you are just trying to rack up as many wins as possible as fast as you can, because you do get a bonus for winning games in this format, and that's a really great thing that the Gwent license tournaments have. You do get rewarded for every game you win.
Match score is fantastic.
So if you believe that Eridan is your weakest in the lineup, you will lead off with Brand to see if you can get just an extra win. But ultimately, the breakthrough will have to happen with Eridan.
That is the very shrewd approach to tournaments. Yeah, I'm probably going to lose at this. I'll play my other stuff.
No, I'm not saying that you'd approach it like I'm probably going to lose. I'm just saying that you play with your likelihood. But of course, you also want to predict the matchup, of course. But since Eridan is likely to have a bad matchup against Croc, again, Metranos' entire lineup. That's the whole thing, right? That's the whole thing about the Conquest targeting.
We hear the Croc coming out once again.
There's Brand.
Against the Brand. So it's going to be Brand versus Crack and Crate. Metranos on the Crack. Gameking on the Brand.
Metranos on the Crack. Clip it. The battle of who is the mightiest Skellige guy on a boat. I said that.
Skellige guy.
I saw you taking a sip of water. I tried to be funny.
You won, yeah.
All right. No, but this is really good because these are two very different. There's some commonalities in some of the bronzes, and of course the commonalities between Dorgray and Restore. But these are very different decks as far as Skellige is concerned. These are two, a tried and true. Gameking not happy with his hand. A tried and true, Brand deck with some subtle variations that we talked about before. But it's coming up against a very different style of Skellige.
Yeah, I mean, and there's several sort of very key plays here in both decks. So Gameking has the ability to take out an Axeman immediately with Lugos. He can discard a Warmonger and kill the Axeman, even through the armor. And Coral is also fantastic for nullifying one of those Axemen. And the wonderful thing about Coral is she actually transforms the unit, which denies the Resurrect on it as well. So if there's only one Axeman and Metranos is relying on resurrecting that, Coral just shuts it down completely. So it's a tough game, though, for Bran, for sure, because Bran is susceptible to getting like 2-round tempos, and if he gets both his gold weathers and he gets his lacerates and his axemans out, Metranos can pressure him enormously. So it's going to come down to very clutch plays in this situation.
He doesn't have both of his gold weathers, but he has the next best thing, the Ragnarok and White Frost. So there is a pretty strong amount of pressure that can already be applied. Ragnarok right now does bring out Roach, and then the attrition begins. Being able to isolate Morkvarg and just hit it, making sure that it gets a little bit less value, and of course isn't able to actually benefit Sarius as much by removing it. And we do know that Gameking does not. Well, I'm just going to quickly review the deck list before I make that call. I apologize. Gameking is the one that is running Morkvarg, but there is the Ragnarok, although I was incorrect about Roach. But there is the Ragnarok that's going to start applying the pressure here on the round. We've seen a lot of decks today.
We've seen a lot of
Roach today.
Yeah. There's what Super JJ's been playing. There's Roaches everywhere. I just assume Roach is in every deck.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, but it's actually really cool. Playing Roach with the Gold Weather allows you to actually get that little bit of extra tempo because playing the Gold Weather, it's a long-term powerhouse of a card, but short-term quite slow. Roach just kind of speeds that up a little bit, which is really good in the early rounds, or if you're trying to do like a really favorable pass.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Like Roach in this instance would have actually given Metranos the ability to, Gameking couldn't pass because Metranos would have taken it. So, yeah, Roach is a really, really great addition. It's very much like a playstyle thing. Depending on how you use your gold cards, Roach can be extremely powerful. And yeah, it's personally a card that I really like doing. But
Skellige silver slots are a little tight for Roach sometimes.
They certainly are. Skellige has some of the most rigid silvers in the game. but some people have found ways to flex them wonderfully. So we've seen Holger Blackhand played in this tournament. I mean,
I like that. Yeah,
that's pretty cool. Freddy put it to great use as well, taking out that Eridan, buffing the Saris. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was really cool. Kind of, it felt like a preferential style, but also something that maybe just hasn't been seen before and hasn't really been worked on. But because you're not putting Olgierd in the deck, Saris ends up being the strongest thing in the graveyard, and it works perfectly. You do need to draw him, but if he's going to get you value one way or another. But that was the Skellige of a past matchup, and we are here. It is 1-1 in the finals for Gwentslam 2, and it's interesting. You talked about how good Coral would be against Axeman. It's going to be used here instead against Morkvarg, and there is no renew. That is the one Coral that we will see. So there is no removal of Axeman, and there will be no compressing.
I mean, I think that he may be relying upon Lugos to kill the initial Axeman. And after that one, if you're just rezzing out like a default Axeman after that, that's very low tempo.
Yeah.
Like, you will suffer for doing that, essentially. So I like the Coral on the Morkvarg here. Kraken Crate, his whole thing is he buffs up the unit that he plays. It makes a Morkvarg pretty good, actually. And importantly, it makes his carryover stronger than the other Skellige's carryover. We've seen this already in his games. He's like, yeah, you've got your Morkvarg. Well, so do I, and my Morkvarg's better because I'm playing Kraken Crate. So
yeah, right.
That's a really, really key thing to have. So I like the artifact compression here. It basically nullifies his leader. So it's pretty nice.
I mean, yeah, you're right. And there are some solutions for the Axeman. Of course, Gameking is running Harpooner, so he can move the Axeman freely. Of course, Madman Lugos can take one out. And then, of course, Igni, especially with Udalric being able to pad up one of those rows for a more favorable Igni, and possibly a fantastic Igni if he's able to line up those 12s, which would be kind of out of Metranos' control if it's timed correctly. So we might see a great Igni. I think that I've been dying to see Gameking get a lot of value out of his Scorch-based cards.
Yeah, definitely. Just for his sake at this point.
Yeah.
I want to see him be successful with them. But we saw a pretty clutch Scorch. It helped him out with killing the Axeman. But yeah, Igni will be very, very, very important in this matchup. And it's an interesting one, because actually the Axeman deck naturally plays into Igni because it puts Whale Harpooners next to the Axeman that it wants to pull units up to. So because of this, it can actually be fairly simple to hit an Igni against an Axeman deck, which is a really, really nice thing to have. And Igni, a card that used to be probably like the most well-known card in the game. It was everywhere. Fallen off in recent years, but recent months.
Recent years,
yeah.
As Gwent turns 1.
As Gwent turns 1. Second year, no Igni.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's cool to see it having a niche use here. And actually, it's a great card to have in this matchup.
I'm certain that we'll see it played with pretty good success here as Metranos gets ahead here, and now being on the good side of the coin, getting ahead here is really important. Especially it's not really a mirror. It is a Skellige on Skellige matchup, a little bit of a civil war, but it is still really important at this point. Now, with Gameking having Dorgray, if he decides to play Dorgray into this round to get a Nekomara on board, Metranos also has Dorgray, but with Morkvarg, his carryover will be better, so he'll have better pass opportunities in round 2. So it's yeah, we're going to see that get developed now.
Yeah, so here comes the carryover from the Nekomara, which will actually give him a fairly strong carryover showing because, of course, that Morkvarg likelihood is it will survive into the next round because Ragnarok will hit the highest, so it would take a few turns and a little bit of bad luck for that Morkvarg to die. So what do you think is Gameking's plan here? Like, how's he aiming to win this out? Because essentially, giving up the first round to Axeman is going to hurt him. It's going to be rough for him to go from there.
It's also rough because he is playing down a card now, so I think it's probably in his best interest. You take the round with better carryover and, hope that it survives, of course, because that Nekomara is on the Ragnarok. Well, they're all Ragnarok rows. In the Ragnarok, and that Clear Skies can fix the problem, and I'm wondering if that's going to see play this round. I mean, Clear Skies will remove all of the weather on the board as well as heal all those damaged targets as well. So if Gameking really wants to push this round, and I feel like that's a reasonable card to be playing sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Gameking still has some, he's still got some nice little tempo things to do, especially in regards to the Whale Harpooner and the Lugos. But the Lugos he wants to keep when an Axeman's res later on. It's fantastic at killing that. There's several good things that you can do with the Lugos, but honestly, if he wants to play into this round, he is holding a Clear Skies.
It's true. I mean, what else is it for? It's obviously like it must be there for, flexibility with the rally, but ultimately solving the gold weather problem. But now it's a different story because Metranos did not opt to play Akamara, instead playing Drowner, which actually hurts the carryover that Gameking did have superiority over, and it may end up just being a wash there. I mean, Morkvarg will be the difference as Metranos no longer has Morkvarg, as it has been nicely compressed. But, and I mean, it is really only it's about who has more points at the beginning of the round should there be an open pass. But at this point, the Clear Skies is, I feel like, a better opportunity to play it may have been in the last round.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Gameking's going to have to go for the pass here. He's so far behind, and the thing is, if he plays much more rounds, he's going to lose that Akamara, like you said. So, all in all, I think this is actually a really, really strong round for Metranos because he now dictates the flow of the game, and he can just take Gameking to a long round 3, which is exactly where he wants him. Like, if you can get that weather attrition going, if you can get the whale hop in as the last rate's coming out, it's very, very rough. For King Brandon in a long round 3, it will be tough.
Now, I don't think that it would really be tough for Metranos to play into this, as Gameking starts the round off with 18 points already, and wanting that long round for Metranos, you'd favorably take that into round 3 perhaps. Gameking doesn't have to play any more cards. He will win because he has that carryover automatically, so it will be even, although Gameking will have to play first.
Yeah, so, I mean, the last action of the game is not so important for Metranos because he's more about long-term and attrition damage, but it can be very important for Gameking when he's looking to maximize the value from things like that girl Igni. So he is going to be a little bit annoyed at giving up last action of the game, but I think that he will still be okay with the amount of removal he has. However, Metranos' hand is looking really good for a long round.
He's just going to make that decision if he's going to play into this or not. Maybe try to tap some resources out of Gameking, but it's just going to be the pass. The long round is very favorable for Axeman or for any deck that relies on strong setup cards like Axeman, and of course running the weather. Ultimately, you don't really, if you can take the long round, you take it.
Yeah, Gameking thinking about the Uldric, wondering if he just wants to get through his deck a little bit more. So swap it for a favorable card.
Yeah, the amount of carryover that Gameking really affords him to do this stuff. This is, I mean, I guess you take that Priestess of Freya. It's too bad. It's like, it's great. You want to have that end crate raider to be the discard option for Udalric as it gets played, but it's just, it's overkill at this point.
Yeah,
unnecessary.
Yeah, that would be a nice Uldric any other time. But when your opponent's already passed and you're up, it's not too great. But
still thins the deck.
Yeah, it does still thin the deck, and we see another Resurrect coming out for Gameking, which will help him get things like that Surus out, and he does have Restore in hand, so pretty strong Skellige hand for Gameking. It's going to come down to like this Lugos and this Igni combating the Axeman when they get rezzed.
Morkvarg and Olgierd coming out for the last time in the graveyard, as they do. Just, a small little bit of power, but still actually reducing the timer on Ceres with the 2 Priestess of Freya. Gameking has no issue getting Ceres out of the deck, so that'll be, a nice little boost here. Metranos not really feeling that Shieldsmith, much like neither of us were really kind of crazy about that inclusion. It looks like he's just he's gonna dump that one.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see Gameking going in with his hand. I mean, double Whale Harpooner is typically something you see more in Axeman, because it doesn't tend to find such great value against Axeman. Axeman has like 1 or 2 units a row, so you tend to see Whale Harpooner coming out at like 10 value, but it's going to be very, very powerful in moving the Axeman. Like, that's where it shines, right? So you can move it to a row that only has the Whale Harpooner on, and all of a sudden its damage is lost. And especially when the weather that Metranos is relying upon is a White Frost, which will only cover 2 rows, that Whale Harpooner becomes very, very good for moving Axeman.
It's true. Although the double weather on the 2 rows will encourage stacking into the clear row, which will just play right into the lacerate.
Yep.
So there's a lot of ways that the board state can end up favorable to the Axeman, of course, favorable to the lacerates, all favorable to the weather one way or another. Wherever the Axeman land, it's probably going to get value because either you're playing it into the stacked row or you're playing it or you're getting it moved onto the weather row. So it's really, I think it's going to, I'm going to call the Scorch when it happens. It's going to be, I'm looking at that Igni, and I think that it's going to find a home, but will it be able to, with the Udalric being played in the last round, you could make the argument that it would have been fine to save Udalric because you had Igni and it'd be a fine way to pad up the row. I mean, Metranos just has Priestess of Freya to source the Axeman in the deck, in the graveyard that is, and just kind of has to get as much value as he can out of it. He should be able to play all 3 lacerates with Herbalist and 2 lacerates. I don't believe he played one in round 1. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't believe he did, no. So yeah, this is going to be a really, really powerful round for both players, actually. They're both sitting on hands that they're going to like the look of. We see a Clear Skies come out, which is going to be huge for Gameking because there is no alternate weather for Metranos to apply right now. So Metranos has lost a huge source of attrition damage. That is really, really tough for him to deal with.
So Gameking's patience with that first light, even though he used it, even though he brought it to counter, a huge amount of weather, deciding to just pass out of the round one, and then probably, accurately saying, well, I've got a lot of carryover. You're probably not going to want to play into this because I would, be able to work with that. And then holding that Clear Skies for the ultimate weather in round 3, the round that really matters the most. So being able to clear this weather is pretty big, but there's still a lot of damage potential here, in instances of damage with the Lacerate for Metranos.
Yeah, definitely. And here we go. We see the Madman himself, Madman Lugos, coming down. Of course, Axemen have veterans, so they go up in strength, but so do Warmongers. So Warmongers actually keep up with them and are able to kill them in round 3. So really, really great. It just denies not only like any value if their weather was down, but it also forces your hand into using your other Priestess of Freya for resing it again. So you lose out on whatever other unit you were going to resurrect. So really, really big plays, and actually Gameking is like sort of playing into this round fantastically.
Yeah, he's got the amount of control that is available for Gameking right now, and on top of the fact that Igni could find a great target at some point. I mean, it's possible. I mean, I'm starting to lean now more in favor of Gameking here. Metranos is going to have to break through with this Axeman deck after all.
Yeah, absolutely. But we do have that Uridin target coming up.
Yeah.
Like, this is not the deck this Axeman is meant to be. So
yeah, right.
It'll be very interesting to see how this round goes down, though. It is still, there's still some powerful cards in Metranos' hand, but it just doesn't look like it'll be enough to keep up with this.
I do not mince words.
He does not mince words. But yeah, I think
true.
he's obviously, he knows the herbalists are there. Like, once you know that you're playing around Lacerate, it's such an advantage. Like, day one, if there's Lacerates flying everywhere, you'd be all over the place. But right now, he just knows. He's like, okay, I'm just going to spread my units out. I'm going to limit your Lacerates in value, and you're just not going to be able to catch up with me.
It's true. I mean, it's like Gameking has a pretty firm lead at this point. Metranos has his work cut out for him to climb this mountain, and there's going to be a few options here, but without an Axeman, without the double Axeman, triple Axeman being able to stick, and also like losing out with potentially getting scorched, there's a lot of ways for Gameking to keep this under control.
Yeah, absolutely. And if that other Whale Harpooner is used to pull down another unit into the Axeman's path, the Axeman will get Ignied because it will be 8 value from the Harpooner, and then the Axeman will buff, so it'll go to 25. But actually, instead of trying to let him set up the Igni, Gameking is going to be countering by just moving the Axeman up to the top row.
Well, it is fairly threatening because if it doesn't actually reach that threshold, it's actually just allowing Metranos to get those points, and then you whiff your Igni. So that's obviously unfavorable in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think any damage that he had there would have activated the Igni, though. Even the Whale Harpooner just on its own with the ping would have set it to 25. So that Axeman was pretty doomed, but also it's quite nice to just move it up to the road that he doesn't want to lacerate. So now we see them doing the shuffle and bringing it back up.
Would you say that moving the Axeman was, would you say that was probably not the best play?
I personally probably would have just went for the Igni, but I think either of them is fine. He's forcing Metranos to play awkwardly because he just doesn't have... Like, this is what happens when Axeman's weather is denied, right? There's just no attrition damage. That Axeman isn't really going anywhere. Lacerates are fun, they're good, but they're not great against 3 targets, especially when some of them are less than 3 strength.
Yeah, exactly. You don't really want to settle for... I generally, it's great to get 12 or 15 from that card, especially if you're running a lot of them and you can play them very liberally. But, definitely settling for less than 9 is not ideal.
Yeah, if your Herbalist comes down for anything less than like 11 or 12 value, that's bad. And realistically, you want to be looking at like 14 to 16 value from it. So this is...
Are we going to see a lineup of 8s potentially for Igni?
Yeah, if this Armor Smith comes down, this is going to be a whopper of an Igni. Oh my goodness.
I'm getting my throat ready for this one. I'm going to call it. I don't think it's going to happen, but I was ready.
Okay, it looks like the Axeman's going to get staggered. However, that is the magic number. There is 25 on that row, enabling Girl Igni to burn away that Axeman.
Gameking is thinking about it.
He is.
He can be patient at this point because it's always going to be there. There's nothing that's going to change
sizing
that.
It up.
Yeah.
He's sizing it up. He's thinking, how satisfying would it be right now, or should I let it get a little bit bigger? I think you can let it get bigger because it just, it's going to burn the whole thing away. I mean, there's no rush on doing it. And however, he is stacking up the lacerates to be pretty scary.
Unfortunately, you do have to play.
Of course.
You do have to play them on the siege row. It is too bad, but I mean, at this point, either you go ahead and play the Igni. I think that either way, you're eliminating the future value, or you're just going to be patient and get it later. Now the Igni is disallowed.
Shut down his own Igni by.
Yeah, that's not great. And there's probably something that I'm possibly not considering, but that seems risky.
Well, he is denying Armorsmith value. That was the whole point. I think he's assuming that a last rate will come in, that'll buff up, and he can Igni it again. But it was risky. Like, in case there wasn't, I mean, Metranos would be in bigger trouble if he didn't have any more last rates, but it was a risky play initially. However, he is still going to get to Igni that Axeman, and it's going to be very satisfying.
It's going to be huge. It's going to be basically like slicing Metranos' point total, and it's going to just devastate him at this point. Gameking is in a great position. I mean, even with these lacerates nailing, it's
overkill,
over.
Right?
And that Axeman is I was gonna call it. Well, I mean, there you go. It looks like Metranos is just gonna have to break through with his Axeman deck. But here comes the match that we've been talking about: the Monsters matchup against the remainder of Metranos' list. Gameking is gonna go up 2-1. It is match point for Gameking, but this may be the toughest matchup for him.
It certainly is. Yeah, I mean, Metranos said day one. He said, you know, I just told this story yesterday, but he said when we were sitting down eating, he was like, "Yeah, so I'm targeting monsters." And then I accidentally banned monsters. But tomorrow it'll be great.
Yeah.
So yeah, he is targeting monsters. This is the game state that Metranos wants to be in. He wants to be playing only against this Eridan deck. And he's got a couple of great decks to do it with. You know, he's got Nilfgaard, where it's just that super efficiency. And then he's got Crack with the AoE damage all over the place, which is just going to shred him. However, Nilfgaard, I think, because this has been banned in Metranos' other games, I think this will actually be the first time that we see Metranos play a deck without Gold Weathering.
That is true. Yeah, Metranos does not run. I mean, the thing about Metranos and his creativity, his love of Gold Weathers, and some of the interesting choices that he's made doesn't really like the thing about Emir is that the list is tight and it's really good. Yeah. Getting creative with it loses its efficiency. It's been very, very refined. We've seen people break through what maybe we thought would be impossible faction MMR with Emir Spies, but that's not what we're talking about. We're gonna see Axeman take another shot at this, and here comes the monster list from Gameking.
Yeah, absolutely. So immediately it is, you know, the old Renew Woodland Spirit. Very, very efficient deck, very powerful, but genuinely walking into a nightmare matchup. I mean, he's got the Archgriffins, that's pretty nice. I mean, that's going to be a lifeline for him in this game. But right now, he's got a sort of temporary stay of execution as there is no Gold Weather. There's a White Frost, but it's not quite the same in Metranos' hand.
We see Burn a Brand in Metranos' hand. We've seen, this is now the third game, and I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't catch all of the series that he played against Super JJ, but Burn a Brand didn't make much of an appearance in that long series either. So, like, finally seeing that gold card, like, if that was a more important gold, I mean, it's not that it's not an important gold card, but, you know, it's strange to see, like, with this many games being played, a card that absent. So Burn a Brand is finally drawn here, and you know there's always going to be a favorable row, and it's like an extra row effect, an extra help for Axeman that Metranos hasn't had in the past two matchups.
Yeah, absolutely. Skellige Storm from Birna is a really, really awesome card. It's it's actually, I don't think he got a chance to play it against JJ earlier. I believe he played it in his quarterfinals, I know that, but it's a very interesting card here, and of course against a big row of units like that, actually a pretty awesome one, and it's another way to force out those Archgriffins. If you force out those Archgriffins and they're gone by the time that you start playing your Gold Weathers, you're just in such a fantastic position. However, Gameking utilizes the age-old technique of coin flip and Woodland Spirit, and it puts him in an excellent board state.
Truly a master with that play. But no, really, like Woodland Spirit is just such a great lead-off play. You get your 3 beasts on the board, which automatically pulls a Harpy from your deck. You get the Fog on the board, which automatically puts the Foglet from your deck. And then, of course, being a gold card, it automatically pulls Roach from the deck. If you've played on the ladder, you have seen Woodland all the time. It is a very popular card, even though this isn't even a Dagon deck that is, like a Fog, usually like you're playing Dagon and Fog and having multiple chances to get the Foglet out. This is, Eridan is just fine running Woodland because it's just a strong, strong Monsters card.
Yeah, absolutely. But you see, you may have been wondering, why is Metranos running triple Lacerate? Well, this matchup is basically why. You saw that Lacerate decimate the front row, and there's a good chance that it'll just happen again to the back one.
And here's the thing, we talked about Gameking loving the card Iris, and also we know that Gameking is running Commander's Horn. If there are no units to buff because they have been destroyed by lacerates, then those cards have a lot less value. And if we're trying to get as much value as possible, talking about the risk reward of playing cards like Iris, it's possible that this may be risk.
Yeah, the one thing that like Gameking does have to utilize is that Axeman doesn't deal particularly well with high point targets. Axeman is about hitting multiples, buffing up your own Axeman. But when it comes to things like Ekamaras that eat large units and stuff, you don't necessarily have the means. You know, you're not playing Artifact Compression, you're not playing like Scorch or anything like this. You don't necessarily have the opportunity to deal with singular high point value targets, and that may be a lifeline for Gameking, but it is going to be a very, very rough matchup indeed, especially as we see the Armorsmith countering even the Fog.
And if it's been a while since you've seen Gameking play his monster deck, that Royal Decree is going to be on Caretaker. That is the final gold card that is in Gameking's deck, and that Renew will likely be bringing back Woodland Spirit, potentially Caretaker, but likely Woodland Spirit.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be Woodland Spirit, unless Metranos gives him a superb reason to pick Caretaker. Caretaker is actually kind of good in this matchup, though, honestly, because you can just like res a Whale Harpooner, and then you can move an Axeman out of a damaging row. That's a pretty nice play, and actually it's pretty decent value from Caretaker too. So Caretaker definitely has some pretty awesome uses in this deck, but he's just trying to, stick with the standard gameplay, get your Ekamaras down, get your carryover down, and just try to keep ahead in this round.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to also note about Gameking's deck is that even though Metranos has a lot of potential to mess with the monster strategy, Gameking is running 3 Archgriffins, which is 3 Weather Clears. On top of also running, it's the 3. Yeah, he's running the 3 Weather Clears and the Archgriffin, not running the Abea, which is the Silver Weather Clear on top of that. But being able to deal with rows of weather liberally is excellent, especially when you have stuff like Burn a Brand coming down. This may be a very quick Archgriffin to deal with that.
Yeah, Archgriffin can actually have some awesome uses later on as well, because in round 2, if you play those Archgriffins, you can just take the Axeman into your own graveyard. If you deny those Resurrects, if you've managed to get them out in round 1, that can be really, really damaging for the Skellige player.
Just deciding which you want to pull back here with the Archgriffin. And since the Archgriffin is a beast, we get to see more Harpies come out of the deck. So just furthering, it makes, with this many musters between the Harpies and the Roach, the Foglet, mulliganing can be tough sometimes. But when you get the mulligan right and you get to thin your deck, you get premium draws in the future rounds. And that's definitely in Gameking's favor here.
Yeah, absolutely. Dagon famously tricky with those mulligans. But when it does go your way like this and you get those Harpies out in a nice orderly fashion instead of from your hand, it's a really, really powerful card. Harpy is a fantastic new card that Monster's got recently. But I'd expect to see just like maybe some play into some more carryover. I mean, Gameking is playing from 1 card up, so you can afford to maybe like drop Kalenos, drop another Ekamaro and stuff. So Gameking's actually in a pretty nice position right now. No gold weather is really hurting Metranos.
Yeah, I definitely would prefer to have it at this point. And this is, Metranos does absolutely have to win this game. So if he is going to get, unfortunately, stuck with no weather at this point, he's maybe resorting to play. It's a little late, I think, if he was resorting to play something like White Frost or actually start developing Axeman at this point. But he did go ahead and have Burn a Brand, which is swiftly countered by the Archgriffin. It would be unfortunate if it was like everything that he had going for him is just kind of tanked because he's not able to put the attrition on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do see Gameking just, deploying some more carryover, eating those eggs up with the Ekamaras, protecting the strength in there from being lacerated. And it's going to, this is actually an okay board save for Gameking. He's a little bit points up. He's got 12 points of carryover. And that's a nice place to be. It's nice to have Kaleno Harpy eggs on the ground because they will spawn Harpy, because the Harpies that they spawn are beasts. Yes. So yeah, you can get Harpies out that way. But I'm not sure how much further Metranos is going to go into this round. He's lacking significant power in his hand.
Yeah, it's like a lot of setup here. Like, I mean, Lacerate is great when you have an Axeman on board, but there is no Axeman on board. I mean, Lacerate will still hit. These aren't great Lacerates. Obviously, you're looking at 9, you're looking at 10. Like, that's not really what you have your Lacerates for. You have it to enhance your Axeman, and you have it to wipe out huge rows that you are able to set up with Harpooners. And that's not really anything that Metranos can do right now. And he's got that Shieldsmith. He's just got that Shieldsmith.
Yeah, Shieldsmith is just chilling in the deck.
It's too slow. Metranos just can't. Yeah, he's shaking his head. There's really not enough tempo that he can put up, and he risks getting passed on by Gameking at that point, which would be probably pretty devastating at this point.
Metranos has, to use the common term, extremely low-rolled his draws. Honestly, Metranos is legitimately in trouble if he doesn't manage to get more cards out. That Lacerate is going to have to go.
Yeah.
He's already played one. He has a Herbalist in hand, no choice. Dorgaray, decent draw, but he's lacking the power. There's no gold. He's shaking his head. He knows there's no gold weather there. He is actually in what should be a dream matchup for Metranos. He is in serious trouble.
It's really tough here because not only is Metranos now not drawing the cards that can really help him in this matchup and also apply the pressure that might squeeze Gameking out of the round. Gameking now is in the driver's seat. He won the first round. He can control how long the round goes, which means it's really going to sap a lot of power and resources from Metranos, on top of the fact that his hand is really good. He still has Caretaker. He got his Woodland Spirit out a second time, and Metranos is just going to have to deal with a lot of pressure. And we know Gameking can be very aggressive and push for that 2 round, and if he sees an opportunity, he's going to take it.
Yeah, I mean, Dagon is more typically ran with this deck, right? But I really love the Eridan. I love it because he just spawns a Hound and it pulls a Frost from out of his deck. So he's actually got a bunch of attrition damage of his own. And actually, if you're only running that one sort of like specific purpose for Eridan, it is almost like a direct upgrade on Dagon because you actually get to spawn the Hound and it's just additional points, right? So we're going to see, honestly, we're going to see Metranos just struggle with point value here. And once this Archgriffin comes down, his weather's done.
Yeah, it's just the weather's not going to be there. Playing the Axeman is going to be very slow and risky to play that because Gameking could just go ahead and pass. You risk the long round, but we saw him risk that before in a previous matchup because, you know, it just was very, very favorable. And ultimately, even though he's setting up a road that can get lacerated and an Axeman can get a lot of value, he's holding that Scorch and that Axeman could burn. And that time, I'm going to call it when it happens. I'm waiting to do it again. I enjoyed it last time.
But yeah, like if you look at what Gameking is doing right now, we saw him make excellent reads in previous games, right? And I think that he's read, like, Metranos hasn't drawn his gold weather because he would have played it by now. You would have seen it. Like, look at the amount of things he's got on the board. You would have seen gold weather deployed at this point because Metranos needs to be catching up in tempo right now, but instead he's just playing sort of stalling plays almost, and that means Gameking knows. He's like, Metranos does not have what he wants in his hand. I'm in a superb position, and honestly, we could see Gameking push the 2-0 here.
Gameking could be smelling blood and just going for to close this out. He's got an incredible lead at this point, and Metranos, even on a pass, Metranos would have his work cut out for him. He'd have to really invest and play a lot of important resources to get through it, which would severely impact the cards, his card advantage, and on top of that, also severely impact what he's even able to do in round 3. Caretaker coming out now. This is pretty telling. I think Gameking is gonna go as hard as he needs to go until he is sure that Metranos has a way to come back. But looking at his hand right now, it doesn't look great. Yeah,
absolutely. This is what I love about Gameking as a player. He's just so good at these reads. He's absolutely fantastic. He just acknowledges. He's like, okay, like this Axeman deck obviously isn't functioning how it's meant to be. So I'm just going to exploit this. Like, I'm not going to give you that round 3. I'm not going to let you have another draw and a mulligan to try and fix your situation. You are obviously not in a good place, and you are just going to get punished for it. I mean, look at this. 10-45.
Yeah.
Like, this is a serious margin. We look at the cards in Metranos' hand. He's got minimal value on a Lacerate because of the amount of 1-strength tokens. I mean, it's 14 points. It's okay. He's got a decent Lacerate. He's got another Lacerate, which isn't going to be that good. He's got an Axeman, a Whale Harpooner. There's nothing here to set up the kind of tempo that he needs.
And even if he was able to set it up, and even if he was able to develop a large Axeman, the Scorch in Gameking's hand is the solution there. And if the Axeman isn't developed, then where's the power coming from for Metranos?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Scorch and the Command... Well, the Commander's Horn actually, ironically, would add value to the second Lacerate currently.
It's true.
But it's...
making it more and more tempting to get the... Well, I mean, the Lacerate is going to land anyway.
Yeah, we're going to see the Hound come out now, deploy that Frost to the Siege Row, make sure even that fearsome Shieldsmith is not left undamaged. So this is a great board state for Gameking right now.
Yeah. He's got a lot of tempo options in Commander's Horn. I mean, it is already a row that's going to get lacerated as add value, but now when you look at the back row, that's probably a little bit better because that's going to get full lacerate value anyway. So you might as well just go ahead and play the Horn.
Yep.
You hold on to the Scorch if you want to go into round 3. Metranos would have to invest a ton of if he can even get over the 40-point deficit that he's in right now. He got two rows weathered. Gameking is safe from the weather right now. It's looking it's looking great for Gameking.
Yeah, absolutely. Metranos in a very frustrating position. He has to play the Ulrich when he's 40 points down. He needs to draw, and he finds the Ragnarok. I mean, if he'd done this as the first card, this round would be looking very different for him right now. But he's going to have to take this. And he can't take the Lacerate. He's got a Herbalist in hand, so there's no choice here. He has to take the Ragnarok. And he is going to be kicking himself because he should have been all over this matchup. This is the matchup that he designed his decks for. This is the matchup that he said, I've come to play against monsters. And he has got the worst draw possible, while Gameking is operating a deck that can have some very risky mulligans, and everything's going smoothly for him. It's all sunshine and rainbows over there, but in Metranos' side, it's not going the way he intended at all.
And with a lead like this, you could make a strong consideration to pass, because Metranos would just have to dump his hand to get into it.
Would he even catch up?
Yeah, I don't even know. I actually don't even know if it's mathematically within reach without actually like getting out the calculator and doing the math. But at this point, Gameking's just going for the 2-0.
Yeah, Gameking looking to lift his curse of second place in startling fashion with a 2-0 in an extremely unfavored matchup. So honestly, this would be a hell of a way for him to take it. But he's going to have to remain focused until, because it's very easy to be like, well, this is over, but you got to keep up that focus till the last second because you don't want to slip up.
Yep, for sure. I mean, we talk a lot about, if you've seen streams or any sort of stream, we talk a lot about safe passes. This is a safe pass, but no need. He's just going to keep, because, you could say that it's risky to continue playing when you have such a great pass, but it's also risky to give Metranos any longer of a round than you need to.
Oh, yeah,
afford.
absolutely.
And there's just no reason. You finally see the gold weather, and it's like, at this point, it's only going to get you, it's going to be fairly minimal.
Gameking, a little bit of a smile to himself. He knows the position that he's in is very, very strong, and Metranos shaking his head in frustration.
Yeah.
Very unfortunate draws for Metranos, but he's gonna get drowned. It's the Axeman. It's going.
Yeah. Well, you could have put it on the range draw, I think, at that point, because that Lacerate. Oh, it's going to die.
It's going to die. It's the weather.
It's
going to die.
Of course.
And he forfeits. Over. There we go. Oh, my goodness. Gameking taking the victory, lifting his second place curse, and he'll be the winner. What do you think of that series? That was amazing.
That went, we talked about it at length. We had a lot of time to talk about it. That matchup went a lot differently. I thought that would have been a tough one for Gameking to pull out. The lack of gold weather really hurt Metranos. Gameking is going to take the win 3-1. He is your Gwentslam 2 champion, taking the prize pool and all the crown points. He did a fantastic job. He played very, very well.
He certainly did. We saw him make such amazingly key reads there. Even at the beginning of that second round, he said, well, there's no gold weather coming out, so I know you're bricked. Like, you're bricked. And while it's easy to be like, well, Metranos drew terribly, so he lost, like, that played into it. But the fact of the matter is just that Gameking recognized that so quickly and capitalized on the situation and absolutely ran with it. And he 2-0 to get his first tournament victory. Fantastic.
A lot of really excited people here as Gameking did win in Austria. So we do have an Austrian victory here in Gwentslam too. So there is some excitement around here. And I think the Gameking, of course, most excited person in the villa as he is coming down here, getting lots of hugs, lots of handshakes. Come on over, my friend. Have a seat.
Give me my headset.
Yeah. Gameking, third time's a charm, my friend. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations on taking that out. Let's talk about those matchups. Were you worried about the monster matchup against Axeman there, and how thrilled were you at what point did you realize, I got this, he doesn't have his gold weathers, I can really push here?
Yeah, monster against Skellige with the X-Men is not a good matchup, right? And yeah, I just had to draw my Woodland and going second.
Yeah.
And yeah, after normally you play a gold weather, but then he didn't play one, so probably he doesn't have one in hand. And then he had to play the gold Skellige Storm. And then he had the Griffin, so it was the goal was to win the round on even cards, and then I could bleed him in round 2 and round 3 maybe play my finisher or something else. But I also before we look at each other's decks and I saw no weather clear, so just wear him down, and only one armor smith took it with the Archgriffin, so he can't resurrect it. And worked out for me. I'm happy that it worked out.
Now there was a game there at the beginning there, the game that you did lose. There was that Scorch that you held in your hand was really rough. You at one point it seemed like it was a fairly good opportunity to Scorch immediately going into the beginning of the round. But by doing that, you actually ended up holding on to it. How did you? You didn't seem to let it affect you too much, and you actually got a lot of value out of your Scorches in the future. But how would you feel about that match?
Yeah, I really regretted it. Afterwards, I thought, I should have just scotched the 6-power siege support, and because Scotch can blank if you only have 5 units. I thought his last card is Scotch, and then he scotches my 10-power dude, and then I can scotch his 8s.
The counter
but
Scotch,
but it wasn't it. Yeah.
And we talked earlier in the interview when we talked about how much you liked Iris, and there wasn't a lot of Iris play. You didn't actually have to take those risks. You didn't even play it. But we're all getting really excited here for the ceremony. But I think that. Do you have any closing remarks do you have any shout-outs to give before we go upstairs and we hand you the trophy that you rightfully deserve?
I really want to thank Life Coach for hosting these extremely amazing, awesome tournaments, and all the other players are extremely good because the place to qualified for Strifair qualified had to win against 250 people or more, and everybody deserves to be in, and good luck in the next tournaments to the players, and I'm happy I won it. Thank you.
Oh, no, it's great. It's great to see you get to the finals twice, and then you finally get to the third finals, and you were able to take it. Really good job. We're going to be going upstairs in just a second, but I do want to say a huge thank you to the team, the production team here, Jasper, Marty, and
the
Alex.
production team is extremely amazing as well. Yeah.
We had a fantastic week.